Hi and welcome to Iftinka Aqliga. Today we'll be talking about guilt trips and how codependency breeds contempt. This might be a bit of a triggering title for some people, but we will get through this and hopefully this will open your eyes to this dynamic. So I wanted to start this off with a quote. Your parents didn't leave you when you were young, so do not leave them when they are old. For many people who come from collectivist societies, particularly the Muslim world, this might be a triggering topic for them, guilt trips and codependency. So what is guilt tripping? Guilt tripping means causing another person to feel guilt or a sense of responsibility to change their behavior or take a specific action. So because guilt can be such a powerful motivator of human behavior, people can wield it as a tool to change how other people feel, think, and behave. People might induce feelings of unjustified guilt or responsibility to manipulate the other person's emotions and behaviors. So guilt tripping is generally when someone induces feelings of guilt in someone else for making a decision that would otherwise empower their lives or to leave a distressing environment. For example, a husband who threatens to hurt himself if his wife tries to divorce him. So I wanted to narrow this topic to the Muslim world and parent-child relationships, since this is a big factor in why people stay in troubling family systems. They are generally afraid that their parents would hurt themselves or neglect themselves or sabotage their lives if they did something that the parents did not approve of. So hurting themselves isn't strictly about suicide, if that's what some people might be thinking, but it's generally holding over someone's head that bad things will happen to them as an individual, to their family, to their parents, or anyone they love for making a decision that they do not support. We've probably all heard of the many times or the many examples of parents holding a curse or a threat of disownment over their children, their adult children's heads, if they marry someone the parents don't approve of. Does that sound familiar at all? Or how about parents threatening their adult children by saying, "We will never visit your kids if your daughters don't wear hijab." So there are many more examples, and they aren't alone guilt trips, but guilt trips are generally born out of codependency. The main sign of codependency is someone consistently elevating the needs of others above their own. And then the signs that someone might be under the influence of codependency is someone is controlling their behavior, or they're being called to self-sacrifice or give too much of themselves, or someone having the fear of rejection, so they end up behaving in ways to prevent that rejection from happening. Let's look at how Islam breeds codependency and guilt trips. So here are some examples. Beware, abstain from angering the parents. The fragrance of paradise is perceived even at a distance of 1,000 years, but those who are disobedient to parents and those who cut off ties with relatives will not be able to smell it. One who displeases the parents, it is as if he has displeased Allah. One who angers both of his parents, it is as if he has angered Allah. Allah will not speak to three kinds of people on the day of Qiyamah. Neither will he have mercy upon them, nor will he purify their sins. There is for them a horrible chastisement. The three types of people are the believers in destiny, the drunkards, and those who disobeyed their parents. So another example that I wanted to give, and this is not strictly for Somalis, but Somalis do have this concept of inkar, which is generally cursing, and a lot of other cultures share the same sentiment of cursing. And inkar, basically it's a superstition that of cursing someone with something and that would later occur. So there's lots of superstitions in Islam, there's lots of superstition in Somali culture, and one of them is just parents cursing their children, and this is perceived to be an everlasting sentiment, and it is impossible to undo a parental curse. There are Islamic teachings that disobedience which can be anything a parent dislikes. To disobedience to one's parent is a cause to be thrown in hell. A lot of the time, a parent just has to feel disappointed or angered in order to threaten a curse on their children. And so this is usually done, the indoctrination starts very early that, hey, don't disobey your parents or they will curse you and you will go to hell or you'll live a terrible life. And then so because this is done at such an early age, it's very much well ingrained psychologically for a lot of children as they grow up into adults to be very cognizant of the threat of a curse. So parents will use this to get their way. It's like a tantrum for them. And it's usually, think of it as a power trip for powerless people who have no way of influencing others without making a threat that Allah will curse their children or hurt their children for disobedience. None of this is real, by the way. However, for Muslims, it turns into a self-fulfilling prophecy due to their belief in curses. They serve to live out a curse if they believe they deserve bad conditions in their lives. And this also applies to ex-Muslims who haven't deconstructed the socialization and indoctrination they received in their lives and don't question how their parents can still influence them even after leaving Islam. So this isn't strictly on Muslims, but it's just generally the indoctrination and socialization is very strong, and a lot of people do not face that, right? They don't really deconstruct it. They don't look at some of these dynamics that Islam has groomed them into. And so they go about their lives not questioning these dynamics that are very unhealthy. So they go about, once with the idea of curses and inkar, they might go about searching for evidence that the curse is real or it's in effect due to normal life issues. And then this sets them up for a spiral of negativity. So for example, let's say a son gets cursed by his mother for refusing to marry the woman that they chose for him, or he marries a woman that the parents do not approve of. And so they curse him. Let's say the mother says, I curse that your wife that you marry never gets pregnant. And so if they have difficulties in their marriage with infertility, that basically they'll look for evidence, oh, we're not able to get pregnant because my mom cursed my wife with infertility. Thereby, he might seek out ways to divorce his wife, or basically essentially divorce her because my mom's cursed you and we're not going to have a child. And so people go about actually carrying out activities simply because of a belief of a curse that their parents put on them, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So they go about searching for that evidence. So if anyone is facing such threats of curses, even if you do not believe in them, please distance yourself, because even if you know these curses and things are not real, logically, the perception that your parents can have ill will towards you is not good for your mental health. I wanted to boil this down to the premise that it's okay to reject your parents. I know I use the word reject and it can be very heavy for people to wrap their heads around that, because a lot of the times we have the concept of loving parents and having such high regard for parents. However, I think that a lot of the times there's a confusion about the dynamics and the operations of parenthood that I wanted to clarify before circling back to it's okay to reject your parents, because I think that premise is very important. So let's look at a guilt trip scenario and look at the problematic ways in which people approach parenthood in general. So it's understandable to care for one's parents and to be obedient and to care for one's parents and to be respectful, which are generally good, right? These are good things. But let's look at the ways that people are guilted or threatened into taking on roles in the dynamic of parenthood. A lot of the times there are threats. So remember that threats never have to be explicit or overt. However, it's not hard to notice when parents leverage their parenthood over their adult children to gain compliance. So take, for example, this statement. If you leave your parents, they will fall into a horrible depression because they have raised you your entire life. They made many sacrifices for you, carried you for 9 months. Your mother carried you for 9 months, gave up their own ambitions and their own needs to take care of you. Now that you are older and stronger, this is your time to return the favors that they have bestowed upon you. They have fed you, clothed you, schooled you, bathed you, and just generally raised you. You should do the same for your parents. Can you see why that statement is so problematic? And if you can't, let me explain it to you. Parents chose to bring their children into this world. Parenthood is not a symbiotic give and take relationship. If you thought so, let me gently burst your bubble. Children are not born into this world forever indebted to their parents for birthing them. No one is born of their own volition. Therefore, there is no obligation to return the favor because parents chose to have their children. And this doesn't include gratitude, respect, and kindness and being basically a good person, right? That's not what we're talking about here. It's not an equivalent of, oh, I'm going to be disrespectful. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the general sense of indebtedness that the relationship with parenthood breeds in a lot of cultures. Their children do not choose their parents. Parents make the choice to have children. And so there's no obligation to return a favor because it's a parent's choice to have children. And parents are strictly obligated by law, right? Depending on the country that you live in, and most countries at this point have that sentiment that law that parents are obligated by law to care for their children. It's not a favor to feed, bathe, school, clothe, teach, and raise children. It is their duty. It is their duty. It is by virtue of parenthood, parents are exclusively responsible for caring for their children. However, the inverse is not true. So parents aren't owed reparations for parenthood. That's not how it works. Yet there are many people who are confused about the way that parenthood operates. So adult children should understand that there's no responsibility for returning the favor. That favor does not include being grateful to your parents for the kindness that they've done for you. It doesn't mean not be respectful. It doesn't mean be a horrible person. No, it means that it's not a transactional relationship. It's not, right? If your parents raised you, you are not obligated to raise them back. Like it's not a favor, right? It's not transactional is what I mean, because that's not in the nature of parenthood. Parents should, have been saving for retirement. They should be arranging for their elder care in their later years. They should be preserving their health as they're going through their own adulthood, right? Yet many Muslim parents believe that by having many children, they will care for them in old age. So basically they bet on, hey, I'm raising these children, I'm feeding them, I'm clothing them, I'm raising them. They need to return that favor to me. I'm not going to save for retirement. I'm not going to take care of my health. I'm going to just do whatever so that I already basically made my retirement savings in the form of children. But what ends up happening with this arrangement is that, especially for mothers, they destroy their bodies by having many children, right? We're not gonna go into many of the different traumas, the physical traumas, the psychological, mental traumas that can occur from just a single pregnancy, a single childbirth. Now look at that with multiple, let's say 5 children. With a lot of Muslim countries have more than 3 kids per family. And that's really recovering from one pregnancy, including breastfeeding and just all of the ways that women's bodies have to recover from pregnancy. Imagine doing that 5 times in a row, and that the women and destroy their bodies with this type of understanding that, hey, I'm going to reap the benefits of the children that I gave birth to. But really, remember, like, the parenthood doesn't operate that way. And so what they end up destroying their bodies and not being able to fully receive the benefits that they expected out of their children. So this increases their likelihood of more illnesses as they age. Not to say that only having kids causes these illnesses, but it increases the likelihood even before entering older age. It's just that the nature of pregnancy is very hard on women's bodies. And so multiple childbirths consecutively, with especially considering that a lot of Muslims live in poverty, that there's not enough nutrition, and there's a lot of neglect from the husbands and marrying multiple wives. And so even in those environments, it's already with less resources, less health care, less education, less money, less food, less nutrition, and then having multiple children. It's just a very destructive cycle. So that it makes it even more understandable why parents are not, if they think about this sense of transactionality of parenthood, they will never reap whatever they think they're putting into raising their children, because it doesn't work that way. And, having many children is financially distressing anyway, so that leaves no room for saving for retirement. So this is poor financial planning on the parents' part, and adult children should prioritize themselves and their own families and their own lives. When we look at circling back to the relationship between parents and especially with their daughters, there are a lot of Muslim women who end up becoming forever daughters, right? There are many women who are afraid of moving out of their parents' homes well into their 40s and 50s, that they fear that their parents can't take care of themselves, or that they will fall ill from depression or sadness or neglect or poverty from having their children leave. A lot of times it's maybe the youngest daughter or the oldest daughter. These women end up never marrying or having children of their own. They never end up moving out or having careers and lives of their own. They never date. All of it, they live a life of sacrifice to taking care of their parents. So they just spend the rest of their lives being caregivers to their parents. There's also, this applies to even women who are mothers and daughters. Even women who have their own children and family, they are still guilt-tripped into caring for their parents. And this adds to their already stressful workloads. They're now responsible for caring for 3 generations of people: their parents, themselves and their husbands, and their children. And some women even go about to include grandmothers and grandfathers, the grandparents. So it's 4 generations. It's a lot of work. And that's why it's so important especially for women, but just all adult children, to be cognizant of this dynamic of codependency and guilt tripping that causes them to feel indebted to their parents. I just want to wrap it up with this conclusion that it's important to be aware of one's own inclinations and their susceptibility to being guilt tripped or falling into codependent dynamics with their parents and then other relationships, because it just doesn't end there. Islam has a deep psychological framework for reframing the way that people see the world and relationships. And it's all based on grooming and tolerance for abuse and self-sacrifice. So there's lots of fear-mongering, a lot of limiting beliefs and cognitive dissonance, and overall feelings of indebtedness to others that Islam intrinsically breeds. In a future video, I'll go over fictive kinship because it builds on this codependency to one's parents and is then stretched to include distant relatives and even strangers. So the process of generally wrapping this all up, the process of peeling back the layers of indoctrination, the layers of Islamic indoctrination, can be lifelong. And so I just wanted to bring some attention to this constant stumbling block for many Muslims and ex-Muslims who might not be aware of this dynamic in their lives. Thank you so much for listening. Feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you'd like to learn more about being an ex-Muslim topics, and even Somali cultural dynamics. Thank you.